Hello, I'm Greg Sanders, Group Publisher at Food News Media, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, The Power of Big Data with Point of Sale, Driving Restaurant Growth Through Actionable Customer Insights. One quick housekeeping note before we get started. We will be taking your questions at the end of the program, and you can use the functionality on the webinar console to submit a question. Now, you can ask a question at any point during the webinar, so even though we will be answering them at the end of the program, we do encourage you to ask questions as they come to you. And now to begin. So we have two presenters joining us today. Lincoln Manning, Vice President of POS Solutions at ParTech, Inc., joined the PAR team in 2016 and is an accomplished sales leader with more than 15 years in the industry. Also appearing today is Ram Krupp, founder and CEO of Marketing Vitals, a game-changing analytics software helping restaurants of all shapes and sizes with intelligence that leads to actionable decision-making. For more than 20 years, Ram has worked with more than 500 brands assisting with technology systems, and at Marketing Vitals, he is now in the business of helping restaurants turn data into dollars. Gentlemen, welcome to the program, and I'll now turn it over to Lincoln Manning from ParTech to get started.
Thank you very much for the introduction there. I'm really happy to be here today. As you mentioned, I've been in the industry quite a long time, not always in the point-of-sale industry, but I currently lead a team of about 20 people around North America, interacting with brands big and small, far and wide, to help them realize the benefit of cloud and technology solutions in their restaurants, back through corporate franchised organizations and things like that. So I have experience working with, again, large Fortune 500s, but also small businesses, and through that time, I've really been passionate about helping enable the business, not necessarily through IT, but the business itself. So I was invited today to talk about some of the ways that you can realize the benefits of data from an operational standpoint. Ram, who will speak next, is really going to handle the increased sales and increased revenue side of it. I'm really going to focus on the operational side of the business and how we help control costs and support the restaurants more effectively, leveraging cloud data in a fairly generic way. This is not going to be necessarily focused on the solution itself and the tools itself that are used. I'm not here to sell you some new data platform per se, but really, why should we be leveraging cloud platforms? What's the true operational benefit of having them all work together seamlessly? So that's going to be my objective for today. So again, focused on the reduced cost of operational support in the restaurants, knowing what's going on in real time. The first thing we like to talk about is that not all cloud solutions are created equal. And for those of you that are about to yawn and say, oh my gosh, she's going to try and tell me what cloud is, that's not what this presentation is about. It's really about understanding that we really started with, infrastructure as a service and just remote access and hosting and putting things out on the internet. It's moving much towards more of a platform as a service and trying to integrate all the different tools and technologies together and not just being cloud enabled, but from the ground up. So even third-party vendors can work together. When you think about the great ones out there, the Salesforces and the ecosystem they have, or anybody in that space, a lot of them are just point-and-click integrations that just work. And we're no longer dependent upon what legacy technology is in place down, say, in the restaurant where we're waiting for polling data and is that working, is that not working. Those days are past us, right? People expect things to just work. So today I wanted to talk about ways that we can enable, once they are working, we can leverage that information and be more passionately supporting our restaurant partners down in the field. So one of the things that really has allowed us to improve has just been the development of the platforms themselves. AWS and Azure are the two predominant players out there, but using different technologies to really ensure the high availability and assurances of interoperability. Things like, you'll hear buzzwords like containers is the newest thing out there today, where you really have templated servers that you can blow away if they're not working right, and the next one just picks up. People like Netflix, Facebook, these guys are doing code check-ins and server turnovers by the minute throughout the day. And it's a seamless experience to us as users, right? That's the true power of cloud platforms, when you're fully enabling the experience. And it's something that, once it's enabled, things can interoperate much, much better. And it really opens the power of cloud computing. Because in the restaurant business, we know down in the restaurant itself, we're collecting a ton of data. So whether it's transactional data about what people ordered today, what payment, obviously information and the restaurant getting paid is important. There's PII or personal information down there. We have configurations in the restaurant about what the menu looks like, about what, different pricing they're using that day. And then there's operational data from the labor tracking, how the kitchen's performing, what the drive-through is performing like if you're in QSR. So then you have different modes of that data that we need to look after. It sort of becomes our most precious asset for these systems. That's all a point of sale system really is doing. It's just a giant order entry tool or calculator. So the power becomes what happens afterwards, right? Whether it's getting something to the kitchen quickly and having it served to our customer, or aggregated so we can analyze it and make improvements and see what's going on. And then, of course, we want to be able to operationally support those restaurants in real time. So if something is happening in that restaurant where something is underperforming or we're getting data that's a little bit off, we can react real time, not wait for the polling to happen, wait for the data to get aggregated between back office and point of sale and hand it off to a marketing, or loyalty platform to go do upsells in a week. It needs to happen within a minute, right? And that's really our goal, is to be real time and adjusting on the fly and seeing where there are issues and being proactive about addressing them. So I'm going to show you some samples of how that gets done and how we've been able to do that internally at PAR. Again, PAR serves 100,000, our footprint's in 100,000 restaurants out there, whether it be hardware or software or something like that. So I wanted to give you some examples of how we're leveraging cloud information to support those customers on a day-to-day basis, right? So that's really my goal. So now that we have, let's assume we've got it right. Let's assume we have the right cloud platforms. Let's assume back office is talking to front office, is talking to loyalty, is talking to payments. Everything's working together. So what's the big deal? Who really cares about it, right? And what do we do? So just some general benefits, I'm sorry?
Excuse me, hi. I think your slide isn't forwarding.
Oh, it's not?
In the first slide.
I hit the button as I was told to do. Sorry. There's some really great slides here. Thanks for stopping me, Katie.
Sorry about that.
I said, no, perfect. Can you see them now? Is that a yes, Katie?
No.
Yeah,
maybe if somebody else can switch the slides?
They're working fine, okay. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So, all right. So, anyway, moving on. So the operational benefits of cloud platforms are the ability to get all of our orders together and back office obviously working seamlessly, enterprise configuration where we're controlling what's happening in the restaurant from either corporate or as a large franchisee organization, really having a tiered ability to support the restaurants, of course, is important. But minimal technology footprint, right? We certainly don't want to be putting servers and things like that in the restaurants today. It's very expensive to support and maintain. So again, the goal is obviously to reduce costs there. But I think more importantly, the opportunities are around proactive issue resolution when we see something happening, fixing it that minute, not waiting until the next day, that night, or a week later. Really seeing operational trending on a real-time basis and reacting to it where it came to driving sales. Maybe it's weather-related. Maybe there's a payment outage. Maybe there's all kinds of things that are happening today that we need to be aware of. And then, doing the tools agility stuff. And what I mean by that is once we have all this cloud enabled, the innovation that comes with it is really limitless, right? What used to be, hey, we have this legacy polling engine down in the stores. To be able to do something agile really is just almost impossible to go address all those different endpoints one at a time. And having, again, the legacy technology footprint back there can be very, very inhibitive to somebody who wants to innovate. I personally I pride myself on being an innovator. I do not work in IT. The time of IT being the innovators on technology has really passed us, right, where the business should be enabled to do the innovation. As an IT professional, I think we understand when we look around our IT departments that we manage, there's a lot of engineer-oriented thinkers there. The creative parts are usually in other parts of the business, the ones that can really see the business, what's happening, and drive change, right? So when we enable them and we let them develop their own needs and then give them the tools to just do it. Don't plan for it, don't budget for it, don't, just go. That's really when the true agility of cloud takes hold, right? So I'm going to show you some, what I have some real life examples, almost in air quotes here. I obviously had to sanitize a lot of the data that we're working with today. But we had some real operational challenges in supporting some of our customers that we were able to shift to very, very quickly to address, because we had systems working together in the cloud versus having to get down into the restaurant to solve problems. So some examples would be, we had a large tier 1 QSR company that was having issues with their networks, their firewalls, going up and down, not syncing correctly and things like that. But they were really having trouble figuring out what was causing it, when was happening, those sorts of things in drafts. But because their systems were connected to, it happens to be our Brink software application, point of sale application, we could actually tell real time how many stores were up, how many stores were down, which ones were blipping, which ones weren't blipping, what exact registers inside the stores were causing or having the problems that we could then proactively address, right? Not necessarily have to go into the store, not necessarily have to call the store, not have to wait for the store to call us. It was real time. So we happened to just use Power BI to do it, just because I happen to be a Power BI guy. And I came from the Microsoft ecosystem, so it just happened to be something I felt I could learn quickly. But within one day, we were able to track and streamline all of the register activity that was happening. We were able to set up, and actually I did this myself, so it doesn't take a technology wizard to do it. I'm certainly not one of those. We were able to set up real-time notifications to the store, to the managers of the franchisee organization, to me, and to my support team, to say, hey, it happened right now, or this store went down, or whatever's going on. And we were able to figure out what it was actually a whitelisting issue that was going on out in the field. So it was kind of a great way to be able to react and solve that problem in a day. We built out an entire tool set using logic apps and Azure Data Lake, Flow, SQL Server. And again, I am not a technology guy. I'm more technical than most, especially in an operations role. But I'm not in IT, right? But because everything was in the cloud and it just worked, I was able to do all this stuff. I did need one piece of help, and that was somebody had to drop a little data feed into the streaming data service for Power BI. But other than that, we were able to make it happen. So again, you're talking about real-time agility. It didn't take a month to plan. It didn't take a lot of budget or anything like that. We'll talk about how much exactly it costs here in a minute. But where we had, this is a snapshot from my phone on the right-hand side, where we're getting alerts when things were dropping. You can see on the left side just some different snapshots of what were happening. I could pass these off to the customer so they could see right away exactly what was going on, any real-time status they wanted to see. And the chart here is really the up and down time of an API call that they were doing that actually was having issues with orders because of the whitelisting issue. So simple fix to that problem to be able to at least address it. We're also able to see real-time and heat maps and things like that when things are against the average, right? So this one happens to be a map of New York, in case you can't see it. And I just flagged things as red if it was under the average for credit card counts. And back here, we were able to then see when all of a sudden you'd know that there were internet issues when their credit card counts and swipes started to go down and there was a payment outage, right? Happened to do with their processor. So again, real time, being able to see that, and then also filter it, right? And say, I only care about New York because I'm the DM for New York, right? And I can see what's happening inside my stores real time. The other thing cloud technologies allow you to do these days is combine multiple data sets together. This is an absolutely scary picture of what's called a mashup, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, where I'm taking data from Excel, from the Brink API, from internal billing systems, from the customer's franchisee sign-up systems and their CRM data, and I'm smooshing it together to make operational data analysis, again, that we then share with our customers and that they can react to. So the beauty of all this and what I just showed you in designing, I know that was a whirlwind of a technology platform that, that last one we built over a period of months, but most of this was built in a day and costs nothing. Because we're using tools that the business already has. We're using Office 365, we're using obviously Brink that's there and the POS data, we're using the network connections that are already there. I only had to call IT and get a password. That, when cloud computing and cloud systems are working together, is truly the power of what can happen. Now, Ram, I'm going to hand it over to, is going to talk to you much more about how we can now leverage all that data that gets collected, and not just support the restaurants to make sure they're up and alive and doing well, but to make real decisions to help drive additional revenue, which, as we all know, is in the end game what we're all after. So with that, I will hand it over to Ram.
Thank you, Lincoln, and thanks everyone for joining today. So my perspective and what I'm going to try to bring to today is more of the strategic value of all this data. Obviously, operationally it's very straightforward. If you've got labor issues, you've got equipment failures, you need to act in it, and predictive analytics might help you even predict it before it happens. But the reality is you need to look at a much broader thing. You need to look strategically. You can't make certain decisions in real time, but you still have to leverage all the data you're generating. So before I get in a little bit about my background, I'm actually now 21 years now in the restaurant technology space. As Lincoln mentioned, I've worked with over 500 different brands during my career, and I'm focused very heavily now on the data side. Now, before it gets too boring, I want to talk about the concept of what big data is. And big data is a term you hear a lot, but what does it mean to the restaurant industry, and what does it mean to our vertical? So big data is not necessarily just talking about the size of data. I mean, that's kind of implied from the name, but it's really the speed and the accuracy and certainty of the data that's very, very important. So we're bringing different data sources. We could have done that 10 years ago. You know, ETLs, data transfers, build a SQL server, put it together. It'll take days or weeks of lags. Then you have people that have to analyze it, validate it. By the time you get to actionable information, you might be weeks removed from the information you're trying to analyze. And at that point, it's scorecarding how you did. It's not really affecting what you're going to do tomorrow. And because of that, big data and the technology we have today is introducing the ability to get to that data very fast through cloud computing and a very high level of accuracy through validations in real time. So now, big data really means is the speed I can get to data that's actionable. That's really what it means to restaurant, agility in everything I do. Strategically, you can't be agile in the middle of the day and decide to remove a menu item, but you could be strategic to tomorrow or next week if you identify a certain menu item. If a new customer causes them to never come back. So if you know you have products that cause issues with trial, you might start phasing them out. You're not waiting a long period of time to do an analysis through surveys and studies that really people don't like your menu. So that agility is a big aspect of it. And that's really what big data is bringing. The second part is the concept of machine learning. Now, machine learning is not here to replace us. It's really here to make us better. And the reason it's that we humans tend to find patterns sometimes where patterns don't exist. That's just our nature. You know, we confuse correlation and causation quite often. We see a couple of things that look similar, we derive causation immediately. But machines have the ability to look at massive amount of data very fast, detect patterns, learn from those patterns, become more predictable, and help us. And they don't have any subjective reason to skew the data. We sometimes tend to be biased towards an employee or a menu item or even price point we're charging, and we tend not to change it because of that bias. So the reality is we need something to look at the data objectively and drive the narrative. You still have to make decisions as a brand, as a company, but those decisions are now based on data that's driving narrative and not people driving narrative. And that's the reality. That's what big data and machine learning really means to the restaurant industry. It's bringing those pieces together. So what does it tell us about our KPIs? You know, there are staple KPIs in the industry that have been around way before I was born and are still used today. And they're very simple KPIs that are staples, but they don't really mean a lot once you bring it into the world of big data and machine learning. One of the ones we've observed over time is something like the per person average or the check average. It used to be a big staple number. If a PPA goes up, that's great. If PPA goes down, that's bad. But once you apply all this learning into the data, you realize that that's not the case. Sometimes there's a really good reason why PPA going up is a negative thing. And sometimes there's a really good reason why a PPA going down is a positive thing. And I'll give you an example. When you look at a company right now, your brand, and traffic is flat and spending is up, the per person spending is up, Looking at those two KPIs without that additional information would imply to you that we're not losing our customers and customers are spending more money, which sounds like a great deal. Apply all the learning for big data and machine learning, and it tells you, in fact, the only reason your PPA is going up is because you're losing lower spend customers, and the only reason traffic is flat is because you're driving a lot of new trial in the business, but we know long term that's not sustainable. You're going to run out of trade area. So where it looked really good on the KPIs to have positive spend and flat traffic, it's really leading towards a disastrous outcome where we're going to have a much smaller customer base and then sales will start declining. So we're really looking at the wrong KPIs when we are in the industry today, when we're relying just on basic math. And that is the key takeaway. If there's anything I could do today is start thinking about the fact that we're in the people business and not in the math business. If we start evaluating our business based on what the mathematical results are, we're not learning from behavior of customers. We're not listening to our customers. Simple example, if I sold 100 pepperoni pizzas, you would say, wow, pepperoni pizzas are really popular. People love pepperoni. What other menu items can we do with pepperoni? But in the modification of the menu items, a lot of people sub pepperoni to Italian sausage. It was a sub. It was a modifier. So the item was pepperoni, but it was actually became Italian sausage pizza. So go make more pepperoni, but the reality is people want sausage. So when you look at the details of how people modify your food, they're actually telling you what they like about your food, what they don't like, how they prefer your food. Those are the people learning. That's what we need to understand is that's where the data lives. And that kind of leads to the change in KPIs. Second thing we see very often in the industry is when we look at math, we look at quantitative analysis, not qualitative analysis. We tend to assume that a higher count of something must be a good thing. Take an example of two team members, two servers. If Ram sells more margarita than Lincoln, and I'm sorry, Lincoln, I'm going to be better today in every example, then Ram must be a great margarita salesperson. But the reality is...
Ram, you're better than me every day in every way, so don't you worry about that. You're all right.
I was waiting for you to chime in. But the reality is I happen to work shifts and day parts and section and even serve customers that are more inclined to purchase margaritas. In fact, I'm an order taker. I'm a glorified order taker, and I'm just taking people's orders. And if I would be put in a situation where those conditions did not apply, I actually wouldn't sell well. Lincoln, on the other hand, and here's my positive twist for you, is not selling a lot as I am, but he's actually creating change in behavior. For the customers he served, at the daytime and sections he served, it's achieving phenomenal conversion rates. It's actually converting people from behavior of not purchasing margaritas into purchasing margarita. On a quantitative analysis, it looks like I'm better. But when you start qualifying the data, Lincoln is better. Now, I see very often false types of analysis like take sales divided by man hour and things like that, or take sales divided by guest served. But the challenge is the assumption there is that every hour has equal opportunity, or every guest is an equal opportunity. Again, we're back into math. The number of people you saw doesn't necessarily represent the opportunity to sell, or the number of hours you work doesn't represent the opportunity to sell. And that's where we go again from the concept of math into behavior. So the key takeaway, again, for numbers, for data, is big data is not about the results. It's not about how much we did. It's the story how we got there, right? That's where your true learning is. The results don't teach you math. There's 100 different ways to get to the same results. Some could be really positive and long-lasting, and some could be negative. Some might involve shortcuts that create debt to the company long term. So it's very, very important not to focus on the result when you look at data, but focusing on the path, on the story, what led to it. That's where the true learning is going to come from, and that's where you become a much more effective brand. And then we're dealing with people. And very often when I have these talks in different conferences, people keep asking, people keep asking, are we robots? Like everything we do is predictable and you're going to know what we're going to do. And the reality is humans are not robots. But boy, the data doesn't know that. And when you look deep into data, there's a lot of robotic behavior in people. People are creatures of habit, and we see that very often in the data. And if you think about yourself, if you don't like a certain ingredient, if you don't like onions, You probably don't like onions on every day of the week, every time of day, and probably every menu item it might be on. So there are some patterns that people generate that are very robotic-like and very consistent and skew from that. And that gives us a great sense of predictability. So as we build models and we look into the future, we can simulate real customers' behavior into real output. And that's really great in the world of predictive analytics. So looking at that, like my example with onions, if you don't like garlic, again, you're not going to like it any day of the week. You're not going to like it any time. So you're going to have these questions. Or if you look at how you like your steak cooked, again, people are very, very similar in the way they order their food. If somebody likes the steak on the left, that's how they're going to order their steaks all the time. And on the right, it'll be that example. So the order is revealing a lot about your guest as well. I mean, they're talking to you through their ordering, through their patterns. And in that, you learn some interesting things. So you've got a customer that comes in, or let's say a whole segment of customers that come in, and they're ordering double cheeseburger with bacon and extra cheese and extra sauce, and they're spending about $10, and they're skipping on beverages. What does that tell you about those customers? Probably not health-conscious customer, right? But they're skipping a beverage. So it's probably telling you that these subset of customers are probably making a financial decision to stay at a $10 budget because their ordering behavior implies that they're not really looking at the dietary reason to skip a soft drink. Then you take a different example that's the other way. You've got somebody ordering this beautiful grilled chicken breast salad with quinoa and avocado and every other buzzword ingredient you can throw in there, and they're spending about $10 again and still skipping the beverage. I don't think the story of the burger customer is going to be the same like the salad customer. In this case, the behavior is more implied that somebody is health conscious. They're choosing not to order soft drinks because they're trying to keep a clean, healthy lifestyle. That's what the data is teaching you. We found things in data that you can find religious patterns, you can find lifestyle, dietary sicknesses. There's a lot of things in that data, and it's not about spying on your customers. It's not about big brothering your customer. It's about learning how to become more relevant to the community you serve. That's the name of the game. Relevancy is the most important thing, and the data helps you drive that relevancy. I always thought this is funny because when I talk about the attitude, what is something like this revealing about you as a customer? And there's actually a true story in this where this is a dish that's very popular in parts of Mexico. So if you actually have that on the menu and somebody comes in and orders some fried grasshoppers, I think there's a good chance they're ethnically from wherever that product is. Not a lot of people experiment with product like that, especially not in the States. So even the type of dishes you have and what people typically order can imply, where they're coming from. So if a lot of your customers go towards, or at least high-frequency customers go towards products that are very authentic, very ethnic, it can kind of tell you that the community you're serving is from the region you're serving. That leads to a whole subset of a different conversation, which is around who your customer is. Now, I know the industry is for a long time pursuing this question, who's my guest? And they're going out there and they're reverse looking up the credit cards and they're buying data from the credit agencies and anybody will sell them who the customer is. And don't get me wrong, there is value in knowing who your customer is, lookalikes and things like that, matching, knowing how to do new store opening. That's really great. But the real challenge and the real question that I think brands should be more focused and more obsessed about is why somebody is your customer. If you can actually answer the question of why somebody came here, why is somebody coming back, that is the true path for success. Knowing that relevancy, knowing Ram is my guest because he loves the number 3 plate and he works nearby because his behavioral pattern implies that's what he is. And then when you look at the cluster of who makes up your guests and you start understanding the whys, you've got a messaging to reinforce. You've got a marketing messaging, an operational messaging, an employee training messaging to reinforce that why the customers are looking for. So I would love more brands to focus on that. I look at surveys of a lot of brands out there, and they ask a lot of questions. Was it your first time visit here? Data can answer that, so why ask? From credit card matching to cell phone, looking for the free Wi-Fi matching. But you can answer if it's probably their first time visit. What did you have, the chicken or beef? Again, the transaction will tell you that. Why ask? How was your service? You keep asking a lot of questions to give you tidbits of information. Very often you see how was the service, and you get a good rating or a bad rating. But you never ask me what my definition of good service is. For me, good service might be the speed I got my food. For somebody else, good service might be the friendliness of the team member. So how do you know what I'm answering? But I don't see often questions and surveys, or at least should be, might be in the first questions, why did you come here today? Why did you find our brand relevant to show up? Online commerce has done that for a long time. You know, you're trying to figure out where you came from. They track your cookies, and sometimes they ask you, you know, how did you find us? How did you hear about us? You see that questions very often when you do checkouts on some e-commerce sites. But I don't see it a lot in restaurants. And again, data can answer some of that, but even asking questions, one single question from your customer, why did you come here today? That helps you understand what's relevant about your brand to your community. So as I said, I get the value of who, but I love brands to start obsessing more about why, because there's just great information in growth potential. And from that, you'll learn a lot of things from which menu items you should keep or not keep, and what kind of marketing is probably going to be more effective, and where you might find lookalike customers. So the job is this. You know, the customers did their part, right? They showed up. They spent money in your establishment. You know, people talk with their wallet. That's much better than anything else. So they did their part. They showed up. I think it's up to the brand. It's up to the customers now to pick up all these little breadcrumbs I talked about, a lot of little tidbits of information they left behind. If it's the transactional data, the credit card they use, the survey, the coupon, whatever they left behind, put it back together. You know, the why and the who is really just a loaf of bread that you need to put back together. And a lot of the data you have is there. A word of caution, though, about big data, and I'm probably going to kind of finish and go to questions with a word of caution. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. What does that mean? Very often I can reverse look up my customers and right away find their social media, and I know their Facebook, and I figured out they have kids and they've been there the first time. You know, if I walk into a restaurant I've never been before and they looked me up and found out I have a kid and now send me, bring your kid this weekend for a free meal, and I never opted into any of that communication, nor did I show up with a kid, I might find it creepy, right? Like they're stalking me, or I'll find out that big data is really not my friend. It might deter me from sharing information with brands moving forward. So just because you can know everything about guests right away doesn't mean you should act on that right away. I always tell people, think about big data as dating. You're dating your customers. And the more data they leave behind, the more you learn about them, the more you can become more intimate about them. Because the key part here is this. If I came into your restaurant a dozen times, and I never opted into your email, and I never joined your loyalty club, and I never even showed up with my kid yet, but I've been in your restaurant 12 times, and now you know I have a kid from another source, and you send me an offer to bring my kid, I'm more inclined to receive it because I've got affinity to the brand. I'm connected to the brand. We've been dating for a while. It's not our first date. And that's the key. Just because you have access to a lot of data, every brand today has access to a lot of data. Data is no longer a major competitive advantage. It's how you use the data, how you analyze the data, and how you act on that data. And with that, I'll pass it on back to Raymond for any questions.
Okay, Lincoln and Ram, thanks for that information. We will now turn to questions from the audience. And again, please use the submit functionality on your webinar console to ask a question. First up, what do you believe has changed the most when it comes to driving customer frequency?
I'll take that. So, you know, everybody is now bombarding customers with a lot of information, right? So everybody has a loyalty program, everybody has an email club, it seems like everybody does. So again, like I said earlier, everybody's got data, is what you do with it. Everybody's got rewards, so what do you do with it? I think, you know, using the data and being more relevant for messaging, that's changed a lot. If I'm a vegetarian and you send me information about your new pork sandwich, probably not going to encourage me to change behavior. So using that information to be more targeted, to communicate to people about the relevancy, that's a big change and allows you to really create a high affinity with the brands.
Okay. Second question, what marketing strategies did you launch with that you still use today?
Again, I could take it. So I'll actually answer it in perspective of brands, because obviously that question sounds more brand-centric than us. But what we find very often is, I'll take an example of an LTO, limited time offers. They're a great tool for a lot of brands, and a lot of our brands that use our technology constantly evaluate it to figure out, is it a cannibalized visit, is it an incremental visit, what kind of behavior happens when an LTO is, how do you properly test it. So I'll pick specifically a limited time offer. I think a lot of our brands that use limited time offers have found early on that used right is very effective to drive incremental visits, experimental visits, trial. It's something a lot of our customers play around with, do better test control on, and then have a strategy around it. We have one brand that figured out that LTO is essentially the only reason in their market of driving incremental visits, but they only ran it twice a year, different LTOs twice a year. So they started doing 6 weeks rotation and saw significant growth in revenue because they realized that is the only path to drive additional frequency in their market.
Okay, next question. Could you explain a little bit about the integration between PAR, Brink, POS, and Marketing Vitals?
So with PAR Brink integration, we obviously get the full transactional data, right? Every single ticket, every single bit of information, some ability to do customer tracking through that integration, if it's the cardholder information, obviously within a PCI restriction. If there's the part of other platform, other features in PAR from the loyalty, information like that, we grab all that. And that comes into our engine, and then obviously we add all the additional subset of information you have as a brand.
Okay, another question from our audience. Does the Brink API work with Tableau?
Oh, so I'll take that. Yeah, the only reason I used Power BI is because it was free and we had it, right? So when I'm scrapping together data, to leverage sort of in the free way, which really, before, call it even 5-10 years ago, you would have had to spend, lots of money to be able to aggregate that data to, like Ron said, just kind of get to having the data and call that good. You can't do that anymore. So right now, that's just free table stake stuff. I used Power BI. You could easily use Tableau. You could use Excel. Now there's some wizardry that you'd need, obviously, to rationalize that data and get it relational and all that good stuff. But generally speaking, yeah, you can use any analytics tool and visualization tool you want. Brink and any point of sale system that's cloud-based, whether it's us or competitors, should be able to provide that, streaming bit of data to be able to look at and analyze, and then use whatever tool you want to look at it.
Next question. While we may have some systems utilizing the cloud, there are still disparate data systems within our companies that we want to integrate with our enterprise reporting. What tools are available to us, or advice do you have to help with this issue?
So I'll take the first pass at that. Ron will probably have some too. Everybody's got that problem. I don't know of anybody that doesn't have that problem. At PAR, internally at PAR, it's actually really difficult because we have a bunch of manufacturing systems and things on the back end that we need to get data from. I do use Power BI for that, to go and get things out of Excel, and I use desktop. You could use Tableau, like we were saying before. I started using Excel to go to reach out to Oracle here, SQL there, Excel there, Word files there, who knows, and mash it all together. I prefer Power BI because I know it, and it's free. Use Tableau, use whatever you want.
Yeah, to actually address the picking up of the data integration, obviously we do a lot of work in that space in restaurants, specifically obviously in connecting to all those different data points, creating ETLs, but there's a lot of providers out there and shops that will come in and create ETLs and methods to move that data and make it cloud enabled. So feel free to reach out to me. I'll send you a list of different companies that could do contract work of integration into all kind of things. From your refrigerator that can send statistical data all the way to old drive-through timers.
Yep, I agree, and same here. You can reach out to me. I'm happy to even show you what I personally did. Again, I'm the simple stuff. Ram actually makes it, highly valuable. I just get you to, level playing field with where, we all think we should be today. But, there's lots of ways to skin this cat, and but Ram's cooler. He does cooler stuff.
It's the accent, Lincoln. It's the accent.
Yeah, I know. It's the whole European thing. It's not fair.
So how reliable is the idea of social listening to predict consumer behavior relative to sales?
That's a great question because one of the challenges is it's extremely hard to connect what's happening in social media back to what's happening in the four walls if you can't connect the person to the transaction. I've seen it very effective in other verticals, by the way. I have a company here I know that do it for car dealerships, and I'll share the story. It's kind of out of the vertical, but you'll get it. So they're listening to people talking about, my car was wrecked. Oh, I can't believe my car broke down again. They're looking for keywords that people talk about failures in their vehicles, and then they have car dealerships that are listening to that, and then they're posting, responses to the tweets of, sorry to hear about your car issue. Come see me. I'll give you a loaner. You can shop around the cars. We'll make the experience easy on you. So they're intercepting those transactions way before they're even planning to actually visit a dealership. I think in restaurants, there might be a long-term potential for interception-type marketing. I've got some customers experimenting with it. I'm going to be at the game downtown tonight. Who's going to be at the game? Well, I'm a restaurant that happens to be downtown. Do I now inject a message or an offer to tell them to come into my restaurants before they go to the game? There's potential there. I think big-ticket items and longer decision cycles are easier today to use that data, like purchasing a car, but there's definitely opportunities there.
Okay, the next question that has been submitted, how much more intelligence can we extract from customers using personal kiosks to order versus traditional cashiers?
I think in general, any device that a consumer uses, if it's a kiosk or their phone or their PC at home placing online ordering, they're going to spend more time. They're going to customize more. They're going to read through the menu and greater details typically. So obviously, you'll get maybe more information about that behavior. And if, for example, if I go to a restaurant and they have tacos with tomatoes on it and I just order the taco and I sit down and I take the tomatoes off, you wouldn't know about it. So I'm sitting in the kiosk and I'm taking my time and I go, there's a modifier here to remove tomato. I'm visually seeing it, so I'm going to remove it. You can learn more from those technologies if customers are interacting with them. Again, via kiosk, my phone, or my laptop. On my own terms, all options explained to me. Because when I'm in front of a cashier or when I talk to a server, you don't necessarily see all options in front of you. You see the menu item description. You might interact with the team member asking the question, can I do this? But when you see the options in front of you, you're more inclined to customize and change it to fit your palette on a much better level, which then gives you better learning about the customer.
So for those of you asking if this program is being recorded, the answer is yes, and I will mention more about that at the end of the program. Moving on with our questions, the next one up, how do marketing vitals and PAR work together with a CRM/loyalty provider? What additional value can marketing vitals add to this combination?
So it's about connecting the data, right? Take the transactional data of a customer from a life cycle even before they joined any loyalty provider. So take the credit card usage, build patterns, then integrate it to the post-sign-up behavior, measure true lift, true behavioral change, then segment it, create more targeted messaging. Look, in an ideal world with a good integration between a PAR, a marketing vitals, a CRM loyalty provider, you get to the world that when I join a loyalty program, you already know a lot about me in that second from all the historical pairing of information you have about me. And it's easy to triangulate, use the same credit card with the transaction you joined the loyalty, and now all the history is connected. So it's not that hard to do as far as matching, but now you're dealing with Ram joined, Ram is a vegetarian. How do I create offering and gamification and incentives around that that behavioral type and encourage him to be more engaged with the brand. So it kind of leads back to what I said all the time, all through the session. It's relevancy. It's all about creating better relevancy, segmenting customers based on relevancy, and then targeting them based on that.
Any recommendations on how to maintain governance over data reporting to ensure that incorrectly designed reports are not used to make decisions?
I'll answer that one first. That is the Achilles heel of ad hoc data analysis, right? That you have to be very careful of, and that the best way we do it internally is we all work off of a common data model. Once it's created, we agree it, we QA it, which is certainly more formal than, oh my gosh, I need to figure out what's going on inside a restaurant to kind of address a specific problem. That can certainly be more ad hoc than you'd want to do. But once you have that common data model and some measures and things like that inside it, it becomes easier. But that's certainly a more formal project. You would never want to make, I don't know, a $10 million decision based on something, a piece of data somebody kind of came up with in one day. You'd want to certainly, be more formal about it. But then once it's there, having shared through portals and things like that, again, I'm not here to sell you Power BI, but Power BI has the service that's part of Office 365 where you publish it to it and everybody can see it from finance, sales, operations, and everybody else. That's how we do forecasting, for example. So that's my suggestion, is just to make sure there's a one-stop shop for everybody to get it, and they don't all have the same versions of the truth.
Yeah, and obviously, to add to that, you don't want to let everybody in the organization do ad hoc. Ad hoc would be very limited to the people that can actually validate the results at the analyst level, CFO level potentially, and below that, you pretty much want to make sure they're working within a framework that they cannot change the definition of what the data values are. Like, you can't change what gross sale is or what our customer count. You can slice it to a portion of a day part or a revenue center, but you shouldn't be able to then define what that value means. Readjust, take these 4 categories, make them gross sales. So the key here is the discipline of the organization to make sure that people don't have access to make those changes. And in fact, Excel is kind of the enemy of the business. If you think about that, Excel gives everybody the power to start throwing spreadsheets with formulas, and nobody's sitting there validating their formulas are right, and then you have departments creating. So having an enterprise system that everybody's looking at the same version of the truth is critical. I mean, take your business through Excel rehab, and I hope nobody from Microsoft is listening and telling me, oh my God, but really take your business through Excel rehab, because it's very, very, very important that you don't have that. A lot of people that use Excel don't have the background behind understanding things like the Yule-Simpson's paradox, and they start creating analysis that gives them false positive and false negatives, and then they're making decisions on that data. So it's not a good practice to transpose data into more systems, to manipulate it. In general, have a system that's your truth. The only people who can ad hoc that are people that can validate it, and everybody below can only use what the truth is. That's probably the best discipline you can have.
Agreed.
So how do you tie the customer back to the transaction? Is that done through loyalty, through a third-party credit card processor, some combination of the two, something completely different? How is that done?
All of the above and more. I mean, it's what data you have as a brand. We've done tying in of direct mail coupons with individual redemption codes to a mailing address to a transaction that then had a credit card token that then we knew was there 15 times. So it's all of the above. That's the key, right? Is every data point, every breadcrumb out there can be tied back in together through triangulations of additional data points, right? So sign up for loyalty, pay with a credit card, same transaction contains them. Guess what? Every future transaction with credit card without that loyalty, or every future transaction of cash with the loyalty and on a credit card, really become one again. So simple example, but there's a lot of things. Wi-Fi access to the free Wi-Fi. If you require them to log in using their Facebook or an account, it allows you to then connect them to a transaction. There's proximity sensors, indoor GPSs, beacons, RFIDs. There's a lot of ways to do it. It really depends on what the brand has. The easiest one is always credit card. I mean, that gives you some brands up to 90% now trackability, but that's probably the easiest one.
Here's a fun one. Will either of you be at the NRA Show next month?
I think I'm going. I know. Sorry, Ron, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry. Yeah, we will be there. We're in the Tech Pavilion, booth 5557, I believe. So yeah, I'll be there the whole time.
And I will be there at least part of the time, but we will have a large presence there as we do every year. It's pretty strategic to us. And I know we have a speaking spot on Saturday where we'll be talking about some of the future stuff, that we see in the industry. I think it's like at 11:30 or it's right midday. So.
Okay, and we actually did have one attendee ask if we'll be sending the slides. The slides are actually available for download in PDF format from the console today. And with that, it looks like those are all the questions we have. So we'll go ahead and call time on today's program. I want to extend a big thanks to ParTech for making this program possible, and to our audience for attending, and of course to our wonderful presenters for sharing their knowledge today. As I mentioned earlier, a recording of the webinar will be available within about 24 hours, and you will receive an email letting you know when it's available. So of course we'd be pleased for you to share that link with colleagues who missed the program, or revisit yourself to glean additional insights. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great day.